agenda is to,
She went.
I think we'll get started. The agenda is to discuss how this management agreement is working. So by procedure is, so the procedure is we have the agenda. Are there any items to add to the agenda that have come up in the last 48 hours? So hearing none, I guess we can proceed with the
12:30.
listed agenda item, which is discussion of how the management agreement is working between the two housing authorities. Do you all want to go first, since it's meant to serve you through economies of scale?
Michael, I'm sorry, this was John's idea to just have a preliminary discussion on how things are working out with the management agreement for both of us.
Well, why don't we just do introductions then so people know who we're talking to?
Harry Chadwick. Rich Wittis.
Risa Smith Freed. Hadley.
Here's John. David Moskin.
Nancy Schroeder. Amherst.
Hello.
I'm David Debbie Williams, Amherst.
Michael Burkhardt, Amherst. We have staff with us.
Pamela Rogers, Executive Director.
Pam Creek, Administrator. Mary Billion, Director of Public Housing. Carrie Momini, Staff Accountant.
And here comes our chair, John Alfred.
Bom dia. Portuguese, good morning. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, John, we did introductions, and so I'll turn it over to you to.
Oh, I was going to let you keep running it so I'd be out of the blast zone.
All righty. Well, the purpose is to discuss how this management agreement is working. So what's working well, what's not working well, what you want to keep the same, what you want to change, what you want to hold on, what you want to do differently.
Well, I'm new to the board, and when I first was elected and went to my first meeting, there was a near riot. That's what I jokingly call a 3-cop riot. And it went sort of downhill from there for a short period of time. And I think that we have now, the HHA Board has begun to understand what its role really is. And I hope we can come to an agreement between Amherst and HHA as to what the role of the commissioners really is and what the role of the executive director is.
Michael, I would add, if I may, just briefly.
Please.
So I've done many, many years of municipal board work. And I would just say there's too much animosity between board members, between tenants and the board, between administration and tenants and the board. So I don't know what the cure for that is, but it would be wonderful to see everybody make a little more effort to get along, forgive trespasses of the past, and to count our blessings that we all have roofs over our heads and toilets that flush, and someone who will listen, even if it's eventually, to issues and get things fixed. So I don't have any idea how to fix that. Maybe it's not as bad as it might seem. I'm brand new to the board, been 3 or 4 meetings, that's it. But the biggest thing I'd like to see fixed, it's just people learn to get along a little better and work in a cooperative way, logical way, common sense kind of way to solve the differences that we do have. That's all.
Well, since the management agreement is what, 2 years?
So we're into the third year of the second contract. We had a 1-year contract previous to that.
So what's been different since you've had the contract? Good, bad, and otherwise?
I can speak to that because I'm also the resident representative.
Mhm.
So what I have seen, uh, the changes in is we have a greater access to staff expertise. We, the staff you provide, from Amherst, we have specialists, we have resident services coordinator, we have property managers, we have someone to call all the time if there's a question. And the office is staffed about, uh, I mean, we're only due prior to the management agreement. We were only allowed 16 hours a week of executive director time, which is inadequate when you're talking about all the back office work and and then keeping the window open for residents
Mhm.
who have questions. And now we just pick up the phone. If the office is closed for back office purposes or they're at a meeting or something, we can pick up the phone and get someone. From the overwhelming majority of tenants are very happy with the quality and quantity of staff time. And that's not even talking about maintenance. You have such a superior maintenance capacity and availability than we had before, simply because we were only allowed 16 hours of maintenance.
Mhm.
So from the overwhelming majority of tenants, they're very, very pleased and want the management agreement to continue. However, we do have, and every single housing authority a tenant or two, in our case two, tenants who are of a different opinion for whatever reasons they
Mhm.
have. So they're also very vocal. So you might hear our board has heard lots and lots of verbal complaints from just a couple of tenants. The rest of the tenants have now started coming to our Board of Commissioner meetings, and they're starting to feel safe to speak up to the Board of Commissioners. So that's a change we've seen. And speaking to what Mr. Moskin said, we are a very new board, except for Rich, who's been on the board for years. So we've all had to learn our role and many of us come from doing community service board work, that kind of thing. So we knew what our role was then, no matter what our professional expertise has been in the past. Housing is completely different. You know,
Absolutely.
the rules, the regulations, the state laws that we have to, as a board, comply with, our fiduciary duty, legal, financial, policy, procedure, oversight of only the executive director is in many ways completely different than what our responsibilities and roles were on previous boards. And I can say we've all had a learning curve and we're still learning. So the discord that Mr. Moskin was talking about is we're trying to learn how to get along. But basically, what you see before you is a fairly dysfunctional board.
Because of disagreement over certain things?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I would say that I would agree with DHCD, who says that when boards become dysfunctional, it's often because the parties are out of their lane. And that has occurred here in Hadley um, in the past. And I think that I have in writing from DHCD a clarification as to what the Hadley Commissioner's role is vis-a-vis the operations in Hadley. And what they say, and I'd be glad to forward it to anyone who's interested, is that when in Hadley, the executive director is responsible to the commissioners in Hadley. And I don't know if you agree with that, but that's, when we started, the pitch was, no, the executive director is an employee of Amherst and doesn't take direction from the Hadley Housing Authority. Well, you weren't here then, so I'm speaking of the time perhaps before your knowledge. But we're way past that. So we can just leave that, I think, and just move forward.
So my first question was, what's changed? Heard from three of you. Others things people want to add about what's changed since the management agreement? Then we can come back on some of these.
Yes, well, I've got a lot of things, but a number of the things that I would like to bring up, I think should be done in an executive session. But that's not going to happen today.
Right.
So I'll just speak in general, but I am not pleased. Even going back to when I first got on the board, asking for the management agreement and the contract, and having found on December 16th of last year, according to the DHCD, we didn't have one. And consequently, then we did get one on February 22nd that was signed by the DHCD.
You mean the renewal?
Pardon me?
The renewal of the contract?
Yeah, and the
No, not the
DHCD,
renewal, the original.
no, the 3-year. It was
The
going to
3
be the
years.
renewal for 3 years. And the DHCD signed that on February 22nd of this year, making it a retroactive 3-year commitment and agreement. I don't agree with that.
You don't
Right.
agree with that it's should be retroactive?
I don't agree it should be retroactive, and I don't agree that we still have a contract because all we have is the DHCD signature. On February 10th, when we were told in an email by the DHCD that they had the contract and they were going to be reviewing it and looking at it and then approving it. In that 12 days before they approved it, the administration didn't get your signature as the chair, our signature from our chair, and then the DHCD should sign it. And I'd say we have a contract. And I'd say we have it for 7 months from now, February, to the September 30th ending of the 3-year deal. Set that aside. Budgets were voted, expenses have been paid, checks have been written with, in my opinion, and I'm a former state auditor at the Retirement Commission, no oversight. No accountability or transparency of paying the bills, no audits. The audit that is done on your behalf from Amherst, and I spoke to Michael Guider at your firm down in Rhode Island, and he confirmed that an audit is done, a single audit is done because Amherst meets the threshold of the $750,000 limit to have a single audit. I'm not going to speak for Belchertown. This is our meeting. We have not had an audit. We are told that Lisa Fallon, who does the AUP audit, agreed upon procedures audit, which is new vernacular for me, doesn't really touch on financials. And yet, I've been told repeatedly at meetings, we've had financial audits and oversight and things. Gary DePace is our fee accountant. He's also done an audit. I don't see how Gary DePace as a fee accountant can audit his own work. So I have moved, and it's been voted, to have an independent audit of 4 years of the Hadley Housing Authority board's operation and expenses. It was misquoted at the last meeting that we had that it was going to be $20,000 a year for 4 years. That's $80,000. Another 20 slapped on there because we want an attorney also. We can talk about that in a few minutes. $100,000. I think that was misstated because Michael Guider had told me it was $20,000 a year for the whole 4 years. Then it prompted me to reach out to some audit firms, and I have just the other day an email from Powers and Sullivan out of Wakefield, Mass, to do a 4-year audit for Hadley for $16,000, all 4 years. You're looking at 12 months of warrants, 4 times is 48 warrants. I don't see how anybody could tell me that it's $80,000, $20,000 per year for an audit. So we have that issue. Number of other things I think really would be best said in an executive session, but that's where I'll leave it for right now.
Questions of clarification to follow up? Not response, but questions of clarification.
Just one final thing I might add. I did get an email finally on December 21st, 5 days after we had the notice from the DHCD that we did not have a contract, that the administration and the executive director said to me, "You're right, we don't have a contract." And that made sense because in February, they went to get the DHC to sign it. And I have that copy of that email here from the executive director. Now I'll leave it there.
Michael, do you want?
I just want to get hear from the commissioners right now. We haven't heard.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I read the email. I believe that it's an interpretation that we didn't have a contract or don't have a contract. My read of the email from DHCD was that we did have a contract, and we still have a contract. I'm happy with the contract. I'm happy with the oversight, the accounting, the everything. The residents are, the vast majority of residents are happy. And I think it's a misunderstanding. I mean, your history as a state auditor.
Careful.
Okay, but
Careful.
we had a contract, and we do have a contract. And DHCD never said in any email sent to me that we didn't have a contract. What they said is that because of the pandemic, there were no signatures being done in the state. And so that a process regarding legal contracts, they were encumbered by the board minutes. And when DHCD could sign in person, they would. Unfortunately, because DHCD had a reorganization of physical space, the actual paper copy was lost. So it never got signed. And because of the pandemic over the past, those first 2 years, it got mislaid. So DHCD has now done their due diligence. You can't retroactively sign something going back. Now this is the third year of a 3-year contract, the second contract we've had with Amherst. You can't go back and retroactively sign. DHCD has acknowledged that both parties in good faith fulfilled their respective terms of the contract.
So is there anything you as a board agree upon about how things are different since the contract? Because I'm hearing the disagreement. We'll get the residents in, but I want to hear from commissioners.
No,
first.
we have no public comment during this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think that we have experienced some significant anomalies in the short time I've been here. And one of our jobs as commissioners is to oversee the financial end of things. We have had things like checks being signed on behalf of the Hadley Housing Authority by a commissioner, electronically signed by a commissioner who left months ago. Now that suggests that the financial controls need some attention.
And is that something you all agree on?
No.
Okay.
You don't agree that
No, not at all.
you don't agree that Kristen Yuzerski's signature was used to sign checks up until November, January.
I do
And
not
she
agree.
left.
I do not agree with your typification of that further financial controls are needed. I think that you, as a commissioner, misunderstand the oversight that DHCD and our fee accountant already provide.
Well, would you agree that the former commissioner signed checks for months after leaving the housing authority?
No, I would agree that the former commissioner resigned the post, and then there was a mistake about not removing her from the account. That's what I would agree with. There was never any physical signature. It was an electronic signature on a system that was devised because of the pandemic. It had never been put in place before until the pandemic for Hadley, the use of electronic signatures. Everything had to be signed pre-pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, people couldn't sign checks physically. They could not. Commissioners were not coming together. And so an electronic signature system was set in place for the first time in Hadley. And it was it was just a mistake that her name was not removed from the electronic signature policy and procedure.
Well, is there anything you all agree on that you want to see differently going forward or with this contract?
I would like to see the contract reviewed by an attorney. It's very vague. I don't know if you've read it recently, but I have a copy of it here. It is very vague as to the duties and responsibilities. And I would really, really like that to be, when it's re-upped, we're in the 30-day or 60-day period, maybe we can have it looked at by an attorney that makes sure it's accomplishing what it's supposed to accomplish, which is to delineate the duties and responsibilities.
Do you all agree with that?
No.
So rather than, I don't want to, yeah, I get that you all don't agree on a bunch of, are there things you all agree on?
Not a whole lot. It's 3 against 2.
All right.
I might add, previous to our governor's appointment coming on, which when the previous governor's appointment gave notification in April of 2022 that she would no longer serve a 5-year term or re-up, sent a letter to the DHCD, to the Hadley Select Board, as well as to the administration, that her last meeting would be May of 2022. Set aside that she still remained on the bank accounts and whatever. But having that notification, the DHCD was not formally, officially notified by the executive director until September 7th, 97 days after we had had notice that the former governor's appointment would not serve again. Could not understand the delay, but we had 2-2 votes, myself and Chairman Allen, and previous Chairman Whitgus, and new appointee David Moss, and Manresa, the tenant representative. So we had a deadlock in identification. We've also seen that in the prior board who acknowledged joining with Amherst, at that time, they made that decision, that's fine. And we come on the board and we start asking questions and want information, starting with the contract. Currently, board member Risa here and myself, we look at invoices, initial them. It's funny because, not funny, executive director looks at it, the accountant looks at it, Risa looked at it, and by the time I got to look at it, I find an invoice that we're paying an attorney with 2 different hourly rates. And I asked the question, and it's met with, yeah, well, I guess that's a mistake. I'll look into it, whatever. What I don't understand is why 3 people before me don't catch that. So there doesn't seem to be some real oversight or financial authority. And we were told at recent meetings before we started to make some changes that bills are looked at by the executive director, authorized in order for payment. Then we come to the meeting and we're just giving a customary vote to say, but they've already been paid. It's not the way business should be done. We should see the bills, acknowledge the bills, and then have them paid. So there seems to be some things here that just aren't adding up. And again, I'm looking for an executive session to really get into the meat of some of this, please.
So given that the lack of agreement on these things, it's really hard to know how to move forward here. Clearly, I hear you all are not in agreement in how you perceive what's happening or what you think needs to be done.
We're not in agreement, I think, because before some of us got on this board, the newer members, things were just done routinely. Okay? We come here with a different background, different experience, different principles. in how things should operate and how things should function. And I appreciate you nodding in the affirmative because that's my background and experience. And I'm retired. My good friend of 32 years asked me to come on this board, and all of a sudden, I ask questions of things they're not getting done routinely. And I think that's part of the problem that Mr. Allen was referring to. The administration has run the whole operation. And now we start coming and asking some questions about contracts, about bills being paid, about audits, and it's met with some resistance. And if that's the case, I don't need to be here because I don't think the board has any function. If you're going to run the whole show because we're yoked with you, fine, have a good time. I don't need to be a part of this.
At some point, I think,
What's that?
at some point, the administration needs to counter these allegations.
Yes.
Especially in the executive session that, again, I'm looking for.
Understand.
I'm looking for an executive session, please.
I understand there's no tenant comment in this session.
That's right. That's right.
Is it how you,
Mr. Allen made that decision. Mr. Chairman Allen,
He didn't tell us that.
I'm
Made what decision?
to have no public comment.
It's been public, it's been posted for days.
As a public meeting?
Yes.
It's been posted as a special meeting with the Amherst Housing Authority. This, we may have another session, but this particular meeting has been posted to talk about the agreement.
okay.
No, that's between the two boards.
So where are we at with the agreement at this point, given that you all are not in agreement about where you stand vis-a-vis the agreement? Kind of puts us in a position not knowing how to proceed.
Can I answer?
Please, yeah.
Just to clarify in my mind, is this, would you prefer not to have this agreement and be an independent housing authority back to where it was before?
I don't know that. At this stage and point, I don't know that. I want my financial audit done. And for $16,000 to look at 4 years of the operation, I think is reasonable. $4,000 a year doesn't break the piggy bank. And when we voted our budget, it was told to me that our line items in the budget could be moved. I have more to say in the executive session. That would be clearer about the management agreement other than here.
So there's not agreement on the board or a preponderance of agreement one way or the other about keeping this agreement, about ending it, keeping it or ending, right? I just trying to.
Can I answer that? The way I look at it, and been involved in small town politics forever. The way I look at it is we need Amherst to perform the administrative duties, and Amherst needs us for the revenue that we contribute to the staff. And so, given that there are two interests that are sort of congruent, we ought to be able to come up with an agreement that satisfies the needs of both parties if we all give a little bit and we have it drafted professionally.
But the fact is that the Amherst Housing Authority and Belchertown did fine without having.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess my main question, I question myself, why would we do this?
Why would
we
you?
continue?
Why would you,
Why would
Amherst?
we continue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question.
Well, it does give us more economy of scale.
Hmm?
It does give us more economy of scale with the,
Well, the benefits obviously benefit the administration as well by the yoking of another housing authority with you people. And the reason being is we had a part-time 16-hour person
right,
who's sitting right here and hearsay, but was thinking about not continuing. It was part-time here, part-time in Granby. Next thing, gets a full-time job in Amherst with benefits, which there were no benefits here, and administrative salaries were increased because more units are coming under the administration. I understand that. But I think you asked the right question. What benefit does Amherst Housing Authority have? Set aside the administration and staff for salaries and benefits and all of that stuff. Yeah, what benefit do you get from having us with you? I don't know.
she wanted to speak.
Yes, I do, but I'd rather hear David speak. And and I'd rather hear Rich speak
About
what is your opinion about continuing or pursuing a re-up the next contract. You know, the first one is for 1 year, the second one is for 3 years, and the third one is for 5 years.
I think the economies of scale make sense. I think it does make sense for Amherst if they're willing to look after smaller towns like us that cannot offer benefits as much administration or maintenance as we can with the current arrangement. So I don't really see any problem with the current arrangement. My question, if I have one, would be, is there a need for the Hadley Board of Commissioners? Will there be any cases where our policies, since that's the role of the commissioners, is to create policies? Is there anything that Hadley will do differently from Amherst that is significant? A different policy for any good reason here in Hadley? And I don't have an answer to that. I haven't seen your policies. I don't know if you've looked at ours. But I imagine that DHCD's policies are fairly consistent from town to town, besides any anomalies due to the differences between the actual physical structure or number of units from town to town. My biggest problem, I hope this isn't out of turn, is when I hear about, I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up, it probably is not. It seems like everything's run pretty well. I can't think of anything that I consider to be a major administrative management type problem here, except one. And that would be, it breaks my heart to see long-term residents live under the fear of eviction. And I'm not going to get into operations. It's not the role of the commissioners. But when I do hear and see talk that certain long-term residents are being threatened with eviction, whether I don't know if they deserve it or not, I'm not going to speak to that. There's got to be a better way. If someone's been living here for 20 years and all of a sudden they screwed up, or maybe they're having mental health difficulties, and we don't really work much on mental health awareness as far as I can tell. So without doing mental health wellness checks and just talking to people to see how different individuals are doing according to their neighbors, doing something as extreme as an eviction is a failure on the administration's fault or the commission's fault. And that may not be fair. I don't know. But, you know, I'm not an administrator, so I don't really know how bad behavior can get. And I guess I shouldn't talk about individual or try to talk about individual cases that I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think things are running pretty well. The biggest problem I've heard of in the 3 towns have been deaths, possibly suicides, and in my opinion, the lack of wellness checking and neighbors looking after, where's administration looking after tenants, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how the best housing authority in the state or the country does it. Maybe you can't do it. Okay.
I want to have our executive director talk to the policies here, but do you want to go first?
I wanted to say in response to your comments, you know, respond to my colleague here. Yesterday, I finished up the Mass Narrow Conference, which is just full of training for boards of commissioners. And I went to a session on management agreements, which is what we have, pros and cons. Without exception, the capacity for a housing authority staff to deliver the very services that you brought up, mental health checks, checking in, resident services coordinators, having enough staff, a capacity with expertise to check in on folks and to help guide them to mental health services if that's what they need. That capacity increases tremendously when a small housing authority is in a management agreement with a larger housing authority. So if we went back down to 16 hours a week of an executive director time, I think Mary, our former executive director, when we were by ourselves, would say to you, 16 hours a week is wholly inadequate to do the job of an executive director with 52 units in an aging facility when the needs of the residents are so high. If we end this management agreement or fail to re-up it, we're really going to be putting the folks that you're talking about at even greater risk.
I don't know how deep we want to get into this today, but was there discussion about how to use outside third-party agencies, social services?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a discussion about that. And you may not know this because the Board of Commissioners, this is day-to-day stuff,
Operations.
but it's operations. But yes, housing authority staff, executive directors, yes, work with outside agencies. They absolutely do. I mean, if you might not hear it from the residents that you speak to, but I hear it from residents. We have outside agencies involved with residents for supplying health care, medical care, all sorts of services to various residents. There's some residents that refuse services, and they have that right. But if we don't have a management agreement with all the staff, the various staff specialties, and we go back down to 16 hours a week of an executive director, it won't be pretty. The post-pandemic world, post-COVID world is very complicated for the elderly and the disabled who live in housing authorities.
All right. Let me just say that nobody, as far as I've known, the three of us newer people who, I don't know what to call us, but I haven't heard anybody suggest that we cancel the agreement with Amherst. I may be wrong. I guess you guys can speak up.
Said that.
We all think it's a better arrangement than having Hadley be by themselves, and we're grateful for it. But what we're looking for is a few fixes for little things that we've noticed, whether it's a departed commissioner who still had a name on an electronic check signing function, or I don't know what else is going on here, but not much. I mean, we don't really have a lot to complain about.
Let me get Pamela in, and then you, John, talk about where the degree of latitude around, let's say, from housing, or to the housing authority.
So every housing authority has its own unique flavor that they can bring to certain policies. The rent collection policy that we just worked on in Hadley, which has yet to be approved yet, but hopefully next month, is very similar to the one that we have in Amherst. They should be similar. They should align because you can't do anything that's contrary to law or regulation surrounding the issue. You do have freedom and latitude, and we've talked about it in Hadley. We talk about it in Amherst. Nancy's a big proponent of it, is outdoor policy, so like a gardening policy. And each development, each housing authority is a little bit different. So in Hadley, we most certainly have folks that want to get outside and garden and have feeders and just keep going. And in Amherst, we have one development that you can really have those type of things. And then like our larger development, Ann Whalen, it wouldn't work. So you can tailor a policy to things such as that nature. We all just approved on language, the language access policy, the reasonable accommodation policy. What was Fair Housing Act? Fair Housing Act. There's minimal room there for individuality between different housing authorities. It is what it is. My job as an executive director to the three different housing authorities that I have is to run the housing authority according to the Department of Housing and Community Development's regulations and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts laws, and to follow the individual policies of those individual boards. So when I am in Hadley and I'm dealing with a Hadley issue, if the policy is different than Amherst or Belchertown, I'm following the Hadley policy. And as far as I can speak to some of the things that Harry had brought up.
I don't want to go and get into that.
So if you think that leaves a negative connotation to the administration and to the Amherst Housing Authority, not to mention the previous 4 Board of Commissioners 4 years of Board of Commissioners for the Board of Hadley.
Understand. John, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that might help, and this was a part of the original presentation by Pamela to Hadley, based on my research, is to have a staffing plan be part of the agreement. That way, and I would think it would be in Amherst's interest to have a staffing plan for each authority, so that each authority knew that they were getting a fair allocation of the resources. And having a staffing plan would be a great way to make sure that there are health checks and so on and so forth. I mean, that's just an example. Just a thought.
Do we have one?
We have one, and it was submitted when we submitted the management
Part
agreement.
of the agreement, I said.
It is part of the agreement. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you mean written in the contract? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Understood. It's an addendum right now to it, but I understand what
It's lost on the new members.
that's the.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have staff.
Would you email it to me?
So right now, the Amherst Housing Authority is staffing the Hadley Housing Authority far excess hours than the 16 hours.
We get more like 72 hours all the time. Should I pass this on?
I
They
don't
actually,
know.
they actually have a copy of it, but
I'm telling you.
Chairman Burkhart, on that note, that we're getting a lot of administrative services over here from Amherst. How's that being paid? Because we pay a management fee, and the individuals that have benefited from the yoking of us joining you financially with an interest in salaries and benefits and increases or whatever, hardly believe that the management fee covers that. So how is that being paid? Because I look in the budget and I don't see any place where that comes other than there's a management fee. Under we're paying management fee, some maintenance, salary, and some other supplies and stuff. So how's the staff being paid? Is it coming from the Hadley budget, Hadley monies that I can't see in the budget, or are you picking that up and we're getting a benefit from that? That'd be great.
so unfortunately, to the Amherst Board, you're paying for the services at the Hadley Board. If it was coming out of your budget, it would be in your budget line item. You do not pay it comes through the administrative line item on your budget and the management agreement. That's it. There's no additional charge for administrative. We do bill you for maintenance time.
Right, I
anytime
understand.
maintenance.
Yeah.
But other than that, and Amherst is taking a loss on that. And that's why Hadley's budget or Hadley's reserves have been growing since we took over. And that was a commitment that we made, was to get Belchertown and Hadley into positive reserves. And you folks truly are, because of the sacrifices that Amherst has made.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ask Belchertown Ferry on this.
We have one commissioner here from Belchertown.
Well, I don't want to.
Yeah, it's not,
Yeah.
that would be
I'll
something
let,
to
I'll
talk
let you
about
off.
with them.
I'll let you off the hook.
Say again?
I'll let you off the hook.
Looking not at the financial reserves, but at, say, did you folks also get a resident survey? And I understand
Yes.
it's a very small pool, so that if
Yes.
a couple people,
No, actually for Hadley, the most recent one, we were sent by DHCD
Right, mhm.
from the UMass, survey service.
Yeah.
Every single resident of Golden Court was sent
uh-huh.
a survey. It wasn't a random sample
Okay,
this time.
and what were the results?
Overwhelmingly positive, but we remember the survey is a couple of years old.
2020, ours is from fall of 2022.
Yeah, and ours would have been from oh no, ours was before, it was before then. It was reporting on something before then, was it not, Pamela? The most recent survey that UMass conducted,
It was the same time period.
same time, fall of
is the same
2022. Okay.
Yeah.
So for instance, one of the findings, there were people that said it was drafty. Well, we're getting new windows.
Mhm.
Draftiness was a complaint. Some people didn't feel safe.
Mhm.
We but it was unclear, and and the survey did not give individual comments, although they allowed for individual comments. The results of individual comments were not included, but some people feel unsafe. And I know from talking with residents that it's not a safety from outsiders issue so much as it's a safety. They feel unsafe because of other residents.
Sure. Well, and then further, did you, prior to our management agreement,
Mhm.
did you have surveys then? And what did they look like compared to a survey with the combined housing?
If I remember, Mary, you might remember, but I believe the results are improved when it comes to interactions with staff and maintenance and feeling like
Mhm.
maintenance issues got taken care of or questions got answered. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's such an improvement.
Mhm.
I mean,
And you can see it in the survey.
you can see it in the survey, but you can also see it from talking to the residents. And again, in every single housing authority, I used to be a home care and hospice nurse, okay?
Yeah.
And I can tell you, housing authority, every single housing authority, most people are happy, and there's always
Oh, I know.
there's always a couple that are never, ever, ever happy.
Mhm.
And so you have to balance that when you're,
Right.
listening to people's comments.
That's right.
So, yes, people are very, very much happy now. I conducted, as a tenant, a survey of residents just a couple of months ago. And then I produced the results during the public comment section of one of our Board of Commissioner meetings. So I was able to contact about 67% of the residents
That's high.
of both. Yeah, for a survey, it's astonishingly high.
Right, yeah.
So of both the 705 and the 667, and 96.3% of the see how many, what, 34 or 35 residents I was able to capture out of the 47 occupied apartment. That was pretty good, wasn't it?
That's really high.
Were overwhelmingly supportive of, they want this management agreement to continue. Many had me come into their homes and sit down, drink a cup of coffee so that they could expand on how much they loved having all of the staff that you supply us in the office. Many of the tenants have become very, very fond of, well, we are always fond of Mary, but we have, can I say their names or okay.
Just staff.
So okay, staff.
Yeah.
Kendra Arfus,
Yeah.
resident services coordinator. People are getting to know Tyrus and very much like him. Everyone that comes over, of course, we get Mary. Sometimes people see Carrie, and Carrie's our money person. And
So is your perception shared by the rest of the
I don't know how much Rich. So, for instance, it's unusual for Board of Commissioners to meet privately with residents, except for the resident.
But you can get a feel for it. I mean, do you?
So what do you think, Rich?
Benefit?
I believe the way I was on original when we signed this contract or had the contract with Amherst, and I believe everything was been working fine up until lately.
Yeah.
And everybody's in disagreement right now.
But it's not Amherst doing something that you say up until lately.
No, not at
In other words, I mean, Rich and I are in agreement that Amherst is doing a fabulous job. I, as a Board of Commissioner and as a resident, am thrilled with this management agreement and what Amherst staff has provided us.
Okay. I know you wanted to get in.
Well, I just wanted to comment on the DHCD survey, because I did see it. I think there were, you can't compel anybody to fill it out and send it in, but out of the people that it got sent to, 18 responded. I don't know what the percentage threshold is for a good survey.
Right.
And that's the only thing that I would ask. And I did read it, and there were positive comments as well as negative comments. But 18 people out of I don't know how many, is that a representable sample? That's only the comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
At 48%, yes, I believe it. You know, it's 45% or so is really a pretty good,
That's very high. Yeah.
because it was only Golden Court
I understand,
residents.
like 40 units. I
So
understand.
it's only 35 at the time, 35, 36 occupied units. You have to look at it like that. Yeah, so we got a 50% response rate, which
It's not
in the
hurting.
realm of surveys is excellent.
I just-
The funny thing about surveys is that it depends on what questions are asked on the survey. And I would have to agree that in general, the DHCD survey was relatively positive on all the things that they wanted to ask about. With the we dipped down a little bit on the relationship between the management and the residents, but other than that, it wasn't terribly negative.
And I think we all agree that the tenants should be our first and foremost concern. Without the tenants, we're not all sitting here. There's no housing authority without tenants. Right. So you have to be sensitive to the tenants' needs and their wants and desires and et cetera, et cetera. All this other stuff, I think, can be worked out. But we all have to get on the same page. I'm coming from a different point than maybe the other members of the board, just because of prior background experience. And I'm not touting that to be, Mr. Big Shot here. I'm just saying I look at things a little differently. But I think we can all get on the same page. I don't think a 5-year contract I would support. 3-year, I might. Again, working out some of these things. I'd really like to see annual renewals personally, because that's what I'm used to. A contract with annual renewals.
What else? Yeah, go ahead, John.
What is the how do you set up a meeting with us where we're talking about an executive session? Do you have any idea?
I think it's just a meeting.
Posted in both towns.
Yeah, you got to adhere to the rules for executive session.
Yeah.
It's got to meet those criteria.
Yeah.
Have to be posted in both places. If anyone named has to be able to be there and have representation, I believe. Right?
It's allowed if they choose.
Yeah, if they choose. So that's the usual. But you got to adhere to those criteria that DHC
Yes,
has.
understood. Would you and I work on that together, or is that something we would like to vote on today, or should we skip it?
Why don't we talk and then get the vote?
Okay. You and I talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
And then we're running past each board at
Yeah.
a time.
Okay.
I would like to ask, I mean, like we said, everybody's kind of new on this except for Rich. But you all have been on your board for a very long time, and you didn't enter into this management agreement lackadaisically. You really gave it some thought. So my question is, my understanding, and so correct me if I'm in error, my understanding is that DHCD has a template contract that their entire legal team has vetted, and it is what is used in all managing agent agreements across all housing authorities across the state. So I am a little concerned when I hear talk among my own board about hiring or money that would then be taken out of tenant services, because there's got to be some way to pay for it. It'd be taken out of lawn mowing and snow removal and whatever else. So the tenants are going to get harmed by the $16,000 thing, or the taking it away for hiring a board attorney, when we already have the best expertise for DHCD from DHCD attorneys that there are. I mean, we should. So would you be even willing to sign a contract that if the Board of Commissioners in Hadley does go ahead and independently hire an attorney to write up a contract, would you even be willing to sign that with all the possibilities for a problem that it could lead to? In fact, it could be that DHCD says we're not going to sign this because it doesn't meet the criteria required by law, policy, and procedure.
Well, I think you can answer that about DHCD's contract.
It could. It is my understanding that you could take that template and you can tweak it again to, I mean, if you want more specificity in it. But, and again, as long as it follows the guidelines, for instance, you could put, we've just done my executive director contract. There's a job description there. You could add that job description to the management agreement. And again, it's two templates.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's just a template, and it doesn't mean that it's meets all of our needs. And modifying it by joint agreement and within the guidelines of the DHCD would be perfectly acceptable. And I will be talking with DHCD in a Zoom call about 12:30 today, and I'll ask the question.
And I would just further, again, I had mentioned that there is that, there's the spreadsheet of the regional attorneys and they have different areas of expertise that are already vetted by DHCD. Again, that's the best bet because, we're following very specific regulations.
Do we have that spreadsheet?
I
Excuse
can
me.
get you that spreadsheet.
Thank you. And maybe these guys too.
But we would want to try and meet your needs in the contract. That would be something to discuss. Now, we have limitations, so, we can't do all that today. We don't have all the information in front of us, but we'd certainly be, we want to support you. What else do you have, Nancy?
Pamela, can you speak to, I don't remember your name, about the audit?
The guy on the end,
That's
commissioner on the end,
Karen
that's how I'm going.
Chadwick. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so, again, the Amherst Housing Authority and my administration follow 100% the letter of the law with DHCD. Twice a year, we have two different types of audits. We have an AUP, which does touch on financials.
What is AUP?
It's agreed upon procedures, and we actually just did it in Hadley, and we have it in Belchertown the first week of April. And that is where they go over the checks and balances of your financials. They match up warrant reports which is board approval, with expenditures paid, and with board votes. She's got warrant articles, she's got minutes.
Yes.
She goes through all of it. It is my understanding now too that it is not the full type of audit that Harry is referring to. What Harry is referring to is what the financial type audit that we do have in Amherst, and that the only reason why Amherst has it too is because it's federal dollars. So federally, we have to do that type of audit. But we most certainly do the AUP, and then the PMR is the
PMR stands for.
performance management review, and that's another subsection where DHCD comes in and audits. And Hadley has done well on all of these audits. In the 4 years that Amherst, the books, it's still out for this one that we just did, but this coming year, you're going to be in trouble because there has been a lack of control because the board has not been approving the financials as previous boards have.
So has this board seen those reports? Seen the
AUPs.
criteria? What constitutes
Yes.
what they're going after?
This is a very educated board. They've taken the training that they're supposed to take. They've been provided, they have a binder full of their policies through the regulations, the deeds to the property. Anytime I get an update, Evelyn, you're talking about the lack of signatures, and this is Public Housing Notice 2020-16. It goes, she finally just gave this to me when we met at conference.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one that goes over why the contracts weren't signed during the global pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And to back up the undersecretary signing this contract. So we have been following 100% what's been happening, what we're required to do audit wise, and any other regulation.
Did Evelyn send that to the board members?
She did not, but I have that here for you.
It would be helpful.
I know, but at some point,
I know.
there typically is a level of trust that when an executive
Yes.
director
Well, that's
passes
the
on
problem.
information,
That's
that
the
it
problem.
is. Right, but the board came into it, that many of the new members came in mistrusting me based on the information that you got from outsiders. So this is not, there just is differences. For instance, you were a select board member. I believe in Hadley, correct me if I'm wrong, in Hadley, the select board is the HR department, you're the hiring and firing. Because your town administrator is truly an administrator and not a manager of personnel. Is that correct?
We have a personnel manager in addition to the town administrator.
But ultimately, if somebody in the town was to be fired or hired, it would have to be the approval of the board. Every town's different, so
I don't think so.
okay.
But it's been a,
But that does, again, that falls to the executive director in housing. Under DHCD guidelines, it falls under me. I'm the CEO and the CFO.
well,
And
that may be why you get all the heat because you're
There's-
everything.
correct.
And
But there's a difference between getting heat and getting unfounded accusations.
Okay,
A question
but-
is a question,
but
an accusation is different.
let me point out that the guidelines that Evelyn keeps sending us are based on an old paradigm. It's not based on the prototype agreement that we have. In other words, they've got to re-up their procedures to correspond with where we are. And I'll be talking about that with the DHCD this afternoon.
DHCD and the legislature is not going to change regulations and laws of the Commonwealth for the Hadley and Amherst housing authorities. It doesn't work that way.
No, I'm not talking about them changing the laws specifically for us. I'm talking about they're going to have to modify I suspect they're going to have to modify their procedures to correspond with the proliferation of management agreements because the old policies that they have don't correspond with what we're facing here today. That's all.
I don't.
I don't follow that.
Okay.
So they'll get a copy of what you have.
Yes, I have one for everybody.
Okay. What else do we need to talk about? I mean, we agreed you and I will get together about
Yes.
scheduling an executive session.
Right.
Anything else?
Michael, I may say this too often, but one of the main takeaways from the training was that the commissioners are responsible for being skeptical. They used that word repeatedly in the training. So it doesn't mean not to trust or anything like that, but it does mean, it's the Reagan thing, trust but verify. So first thing I did when I got appointed was I sat down with Pamela, had a good talk. I felt she was totally credible. I didn't have any problem with her or anything she said. I was glad to hear our reserve funds were rising and all that. But I feel like it's my responsibility that if another commissioner has a concern, to listen and to, explore those concerns. And you can call that being skeptical if you want, or just confirming that everything's okay, or double checking. But no commissioner should just say everything's great, everything's great, everything's great, and ram it down our throats how great everything is. It's really, really clear in the training that one of our key responsibilities is to be skeptical. That's all. Yeah.
It also says in the training to treat your executive director as your expert. She is our expert, especially for basically a naive board, except for Rich, who, has been on the board for how many years, Rich?
Just 4, but don't remember our original board only met quarterly.
Yeah,
We
I
didn't
see.
meet
I
every
see.
month.
So Rich has been on for 4, going into 5
Lisa,
years.
I agree, and luckily none of us have pretended or demonstrated that we think we know more than that.
No, I mean, the one thing I would say is beyond that initial required training that we had to take within whatever 90 days of being notified by UMass and have to repeat every 2 years, there's other training opportunities which we should all avail ourselves of, because the kinds of comments I hear, it's a lack of knowledge and information. It's a lack of the questions and the distrust come from a lack of awareness of what the rules and regulations and the laws of the Commonwealth are as it applies to housing authorities, boards, etc. And I get my answers from seeking out trainings, say the Mass Narrow conference I just went to, with all the different subject areas. I've gone twice now. There's a board certification training that goes in depth into finance. And so I think a lot of this is just a knowledge deficit, and we do need to be, and yes, Harry, I need to be more patient with you, because now I understand now that you're coming from an area where you have professional expertise, and this is way different than you're used to, and you have valid questions.
Thank you.
So I'll talk to you later.
You will. And if I can just add, I think we all agree since we've come on here, housing authorities are uniquely a different animal,
Yeah.
without doubt. I come from the retirement world, public retirement systems. Amherst is part of Hampshire County. I sit on that board currently. And I was a former county treasurer and chair of that board before I went to the state. So I agree that housing authorities are uniquely different. I want to personally thank you for meeting with us today and thank Lisa for her comments, and we'll work out our differences even on this board. But I think we can still work together collectively if we all understand where we're all coming from.
We want
That's
to meet.
the only point.
Our intent would be to meet with you regularly, at least
That would
a
be
year,
great. That
once
would
a
be
year,
great.
if not twice a year. We started that with Belchertown, and then COVID hit and everything went into chaos.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Right. That'd be
Yes,
great.
thank you.
No, because we're all trying to serve the people who live in these.
Yes.
Right. And we're here for the tenants.
Right.
When I do sports officiating, I'm there for the kids. I'm not there for me getting paid as an umpire.
Right.
So no, we're all here for the tenants.
Personally,
Thank you.
not to sound too weird, I'll be happy when there's no more suicides. That's one of my,
Okay. Hey, that's unfounded.
or deaths, let me say.
What do you mean unfounded? He
Yeah.
just made a personal statement.
No, he didn't.
If I'm wrong and there aren't any, then great.
That really should not be on a public record. There is no coroner, no medical examiner finding it.
Mr. Chairman,
Unfounded and vicious gossip, because the medical examiner has not made a determination.
Well, that's not for us to discuss.
No, it's not. But it is causing harm to have that repeated throughout these
I'll
3
be
housing
very
authorities.
happy we used to be wrong.
I hope so.
Michael, could I ask if David or Nancy have anything further? David's been pretty quiet. I hate to put him on the spot, but, and Nancy seems to have some questions too. I don't at this point. Okay, thank you.
David, anything?
No. This,
And maybe next meeting, because I'm sure we don't want to spend our whole day here. If you guys have 2 or 3 things that you're working on and consider the priorities for either Amherst or Hadley or Belchertown, to fix something, I'd like to hear that. I think we'd all like to learn what we could, in your opinion, what could be being done a little better. I'd like to see a community card. Do we have a community card?
Yes, we do.
Well, yes.
We do.
we can talk about that at our meeting. We don't need to take up Amherst.
So,
All right, we don't need to take up Amherst time on that.
Let me, we'll adjourn.
Yes,
You and I will meet, and together we'll set up an executive session. And if you have questions, we'll be responsive. We don't always have information immediately, but part of what you should be getting is support from us.
thank you very much. And I really appreciate you guys coming down to Headley. I hope you don't mind meeting here. It's easy for me, and I think perhaps convenient for you too.
This is an amazing senior center.
It's,
Can be.
Teach Amherst.
well, welcome to Hadley, and we'll see you in 6 months or less. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you.